Good morning, everybody. This is Amuse News. It is Friday, May 3rd, I guess. Yeah, it's May 3rd. Here in Philadelphia, as you can tell by my hat, we are officially on to baseball season. We are done with basketball, and we are on to baseball. And maybe I'll talk about baseball with my guest, who I know is going to a baseball game and goes to a lot of baseball games in DC. We have my friend Katherine Miller here to talk about her book, At the Table: The Chef's Guide to Advocacy, which is we have a long history. Catherine and I we met long ago, and I'm really interested to hear her talk about this book, which was just nominated for James Beard Media Award, which is really cool. So we are going to talk to her in a second. I wanted to bring you a few things that I've been following. One thing is that if you remember last week, I talked to the organizers of the Queer Food Conference, and it was really cool to see this conference, which we talked about at length, and you can still find that if you go to the show page. I talked to one of the organizers, and they were covered in the New York Times. So I thought that was really cool. It's at Boston University, and it was scholars and students and writers talking about the role of gender and sexuality in the food space, and it was a really fun conversation. But really cool that this kind of hybrid conference, it was partially virtual and partially in person, got covered in the New York Times. I'll link to the story, but a bunch of photos, a bunch of quotes, really like kind of an in-depth rundown of this conference, which is really cool. So congrats to them, and it's really cool that they're getting the coverage. Okay, I learned yesterday that there is a movie about Pop Tarts coming out that Jerry Seinfeld is making. Maybe I'll ask Catherine about that when she comes on. I'm curious what everyone thinks about this, because it's hard to not like what Seinfeld does, but this is I think it's about kind of the battle between Kellogg's and Post's, and so I don't know the real history of Pop Tarts. I'm curious if people are psyched about that. Um, there's sort of a trifecta of beef related stories. As you may have read, there's an article in Food and Wine, which I'll link to. Noted lunatic Ron DeSantis has signed a bill that would criminalize the sale of lab grown meat, which he called the global elite's plan to force the world to eat meat grown in a petri dish. This article in Food and Wine has quotes from a bunch of people talking about why this is bad for the economy and for the U.S. and in terms of our, competitiveness with people around the world, because obviously they're going to continue to create alternative meat products. So this is just going to kind of set at least Florida back, maybe the U.S. in some way. But I saw that article alongside another article in Food and Wine that McDonald's says it's going to create its biggest burger yet. Larger, more satiating burger, according to the brand's CFO. So we can outlaw lab grown meat, create the biggest burger McDonald's has ever created, and then at the same time, third thing is that there was an article about Walmart recalling 16,000 pounds of ground beef potentially contaminated with E. coli. So you might want to check that out if you buy meat from Walmart. That's potentially thing. So I don't know. I think it's interesting how much coverage there is about the meat versus meat alternative industry, and how, like, I didn't really realize that it was getting into politics, but maybe Catherine can tell me more about that. The last thing I want to say, I want to get some input from the chefs and cooks and restaurant people out there. In the New York Times, there was an article this morning about lavender, and kind of framed as like lavender being the springtime answer to pumpkin spice. So I don't really know much about lavender. I think maybe I know about it in like chocolate, but apparently people are using it in, well, coffee and cocktails and all kinds of other things, but a lot of food too. So the springtime alternative to pumpkin spice, I kind of prefer that idea or flavor to pumpkin, but I don't know. Curious what everyone thinks. Are you using lavender in your cocktails, in your food, in your coffee, in your chocolate? Let me know. Okay, that was my quick kind of rundown. I'm going to bring Catherine on now. Hey, Catherine.
Hey, how are you?
What? I'm good. First of all, do you have thoughts on the Pop Tarts
I'm
movie?
super excited about the Pop Tart movie. I mean, one, I'll watch anything with Hugh Grant, right? And
Yep,
especially
sure.
when he's surly. But I do think it's an interesting. I mean, Pop Tarts are such a cultural touchstone for so many, and and then it's also an issue or an interesting take on the battle between big food, right? And
Mm,
so if
mhm.
we think about how, less than a dozen companies control so much of our food system, and here it is playing out in real time, right, in this movie, and it's something that we can all relate to. I mean, either a uncrustable, a Pop Tart, right, a pizza
Yeah.
pocket. We've all been there.
Yeah, 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 true, true, that's interesting, yeah. Yeah, and I kinda like the dramatization of, like, historical fiction in a way, which I'm sure it'll be funny and interesting,
Yeah, but
but,
I'll take anything that will like bring the battle of food into people's consciousness, right? If it takes Hugh Grant to, to make people think about who controls their food and where their food comes from in a way, I'll take it.
yeah, yeah, well, okay, sorry, I jumped right into that without introducing you.
No, that's
Um,
okay.
I think we met, like, maybe almost 15 years ago,
Yeah, probably. Yeah.
at Hadaway Communications, and you left long before I did, and have done a lot. I mean, can you give us just a quick kind of rundown of what your career has looked like and what ended you, with
Yeah.
you not ending, but has led next to you
This
writing this
next
book at the
chapter.
table? Yeah, next
Yeah,
chapter.
the next chapter. I mean, my career is a career in thirds. I spent a third of my professional career in sort of bare knuckle Democratic politics, working on campaigns, presidential campaigns, Senate campaigns. I was a national opposition research director for the Democratic Party. And then I took those skills on sort of rapid response, communications, campaign building into the world of the nonprofit and foundation sector. And I worked on global campaigns. I was at the UN Foundation for a long time, and then came and worked with you guys at Hadaway Communications, working on how you communicate around some of the world's most intractable problems. And I left, and started consulting on my own, mostly working again with nonprofits and foundations. And the James Beard Foundation, two of their trustees, a guy named Eric Kessler and Chef Michel Nishan, had this idea that in back in 2012 that chefs had the cultural cachet and the rock star like ability to help accelerate change around our food system. And that just led to 10 plus years of working predominantly with chefs in restaurants, farmers, fishermen, all around how to train activists, these community based activists, and then turn them into amazing spokespeople for food systems issues. And then, I don't know if I can curse on here, but
Yeah,
chefs
please.
chefs get shit done. And so it was a real amazing opportunity to work with them on different policy acceleration. So that's been the last 10, 12 years of my life, is the food system.
And this book I mentioned at the beginning, nominated for a 2024 James Beard Media Award, which is awesome. I know it's been a long time in the works, and you've been kind of out there talking about it for a little while. But what 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 led you to want to do this now?
Yeah, I mean, the book was really the democratization of a pretty elite program. So I worked with the James Beard Foundation as a consultant, and then I was in house for a few years. And there I developed for them a program called the Chef's Boot Camp for Policy and Change. And it's an amazing program, right? And it's a program that people who work in democracy trainings or advocacy trainings would recognize a lot of the components, right? How to synthesize a message, how to get people to come onto your cause, how to work over long time, over long periods of time. And so, but it was an elite program, right? 45 chefs a year, over 10 years. And then even the follow on effect of that. So even training 1,000 chefs doesn't even tip the potential of community-based spokespeople in the food system. And so I worked with an editor at Island Press, a woman named Emily Turner, and it was just taking all that curriculum and then especially taking the stories of how the chefs had taken the training and put it to use and put it to effect. It just seemed like the right thing to do, and so it's been a great ride, and it's an honor and a privilege to have it nominated, the work nominated, and have the stories highlighted.
Yeah, that's awesome. Well, congrats on getting out there. And I'm curious about the structure of the book because I think there's sort of different, there's different chapters, and I think different chefs featured and all that. There's kind of six sections.
Yep, it's
I feel
short.
like yeah, but I feel like it kind of goes back to like the some of the stuff that we did together. You like structure it in a way that allows people to kind of like see the journey of advocacy. I mean, is this Was it designed to like to get more chefs on board to kind of go through a process?
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting. One of the very first chefs that went through the training is a chef, Maria Hines, and she's out of Seattle and Washington State. And as we were going through the training, she's like, "Oh my gosh, this is my mise en place." Right. And so when we think about chefs and even home cooks, right, our lives are so much easier if we prep everything beforehand, right? And then we can cook and it's sort of seamless and it's more fun, right? And so this is the mise en place around advocacy, right? If you put all of these things in place, then you will be able to be more effective and more powerful. And the book is short because chefs don't have an attention span, right? They're like all of us. They have professional and personal ADHD, right? They're running in a million different directions. And
Yeah.
as a chef pointed out to me, it's perfectly sized to sit in an apron pocket. So, right, it was really designed with chefs in mind, and to be sort of that mise en place, but also a little bit of a recipe. So.
What was the most interesting or surprising thing that happened when you were putting this together?
I mean, the most surprising thing about writing a book is how hard it is, right? You think, oh, I've done this for the last 10 years and this is so easy and I've got it all and I've got the curriculums and I've got the things. And it's actually really hard to write a book. The most surprising thing overall has been the response of the chef community. I remember starting this work with the first 15 chefs and how they would go tell people and people would be like, yes, yes. And by the time I left the Beard Foundation, we had nearly 1,000 people on the waiting list to get in that program, right? And now when I'm out talking about the book, whether it's in a bookstore in Austin or whether it's at a chef's restaurant in Florida or whether it's in another chef's place in Sioux Falls, South Dakota, all places which I have been in the last few months. Um, it's really amazing, not only the chef who's been through the training, but the people who come along with them and the things that they start thinking about. And then I think the other thing has just been the book has reached a lot of people who aren't chefs.
Mm.
And people, the number one question is like, what can I do? Right? Like I'm not a chef. How do I impact the food system in this way? And so it's been really rewarding and great. And I think the most amazing thing has been to over time realize that there are people in this world who want to step out of the thing that they do to get more involved in this world. And that's what I love.
Have you seen like what are your favorite things to talk about in terms of what you've seen in terms of impact or action that some of these chefs that you've worked with have done? Like, are you looking at that from a what level are you looking at it, and like what's been interesting to see?
I think I'm looking at it at all levels. I mean, you mentioned the Queer Food Festival, right? I have been amazed at the chefs who have come through either the Chef Boot Camp for Policy and Change or who I worked with personally, who are from that community who have found a voice for themselves from an activist perspective, from an advocate perspective, and have used some of the tools or and used it to advance their work in other ways. And that's pretty powerful and amazing. Chef Mavis J. Sanders is one who just comes to mind, and went through boot camp and has gone on to be a James Beard Leadership Award winner, and just watching the inspiration and watching how they carry those lessons into the world it's pretty powerful and amazing. I love, I will tell the story a million times over of Chef Paolo Velez here in Washington, D.C., who created Bakers Against Racism, along with two other chefs, Robert Buenwilla. And, it's that story is amazing, right? And it's everything that campaigners want, right? It's an
Yeah.
open source, easy to remember, easy to activate, and it's raised millions of dollars and, unlimited consciousness about racism and ways to support Black-led organizations in this country. And so, like, those things are amazing, right? And I
Yeah.
could talk about them all day.
Yeah. What do you is the range of causes like pretty broad in terms of what people that you found have been interested in? I mean, I assume there's a lot about food insecurity and food system stuff, but broadly you're talking about anti-racism. Like, is it kind of across the spectrum?
Yeah, I mean, chefs aren't a monolithic community, right?
Yeah.
They're individuals, and so one of the things about the book and is that the tools aren't meant for just one cause, right? Like they're not precious to oh, you can only do this if you're a hunger advocate, or you can only do this if you're a anti-racism advocate, right? It's a basic recipe, right? It's like a
Hmm.
chocolate chip recipe. It's like, and you can do anything with that chocolate chip recipe, right? You can enhance it. You can use it to, make different cookies from different cultures, like all the things. And so this is a recipe for advocacy, and you can use it in any way related to any issue. So, I've seen, there are chefs in the book. We talk about gun control efforts. I talk about gun control efforts in the book, anti-racist efforts in the book. I talk about, but they also talk about food hunger and insecurity, food waste efforts, sustainable seafood. So it's the gamut. And I think that goes to the thing that food is so central to all of our lives, and it's not just food, right? It's
Yeah.
jobs, it's economy, it's culture, it's memories, it's everything. And so to it's health, it's so to us. And so the book and the advocacy tools and stuff are really just a recipe for how people can show up in the world in a way that they're more effective.
That's really cool. And I know that, like I mentioned, you've been out talking about this book for a while. What's been the response, or what's been some like interesting or surprising things that you found as you've been like, talking to people about the book?
Yeah, I mean, selling a book is hard, right? The book came out in late September, so I've sort of been on the road for the last 6 months or so, like talking about the book. I think one is that I'm always surprised when people show up, right? That aren't chefs or aren't people that I know, right?
Right. Right.
And so,
Yeah.
like, I'm in a bookstore in Florida, in Winter Park, Florida, and it's not a big crowd, but like people that I don't know came out on a Friday night to talk about food systems, which is really like amazing, because
Really
sometimes
amazing.
you don't think that people care about food systems.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right. And then the other thing it's allowed me to do is reconnect with a lot of chefs and hear what they're doing. Right. And I think it's been so exciting and heartening to know that the work continues, right? And so even if you as an individual step out of, say, like an institution, or you spend time writing a book or something, the world doesn't stop, right?
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
to know that the training has sort of lived on and touched people in different ways is really exciting. So that's been fun to just reconnect. But I'll tell you, I'll take those random people that I don't know in random bookstores around, independent bookstores around the country, and I'm like, oh my god, you
That is
care about food.
yeah, it's really cool. I have a question, like, logistically. It seems
Yeah.
like chefs, maybe more than any other profession, although maybe this is an overgeneralization, are really hard to, like, wrangle. Um, it feels like, just from doing podcasts with chefs and talking to chefs about, HRN and what we're doing, it seems because they're so busy and they're kind of like they're not sitting in front of their computer all day like a lot of us, right?
Yeah.
They're always on the go. Like, was that a challenge? Did that present challenges for you in the book?
It did, I mean, it not necessarily, it did, right? In the early day, oh, I think it does continue, right? I think, chefs are hyper busy. They have a lot of things going on. And the chef who is poised to step out of the kitchen, right, and step into policy or fundraising or community activism or all those kind of things is definitely, needs to clear some time on their calendar to do it. But I think what it also requires is the nonprofit or the media organization or the folks to reconfigure how you talk to them, right? So, I mean, just a basic thing, like I don't send chefs emails. I text them
Yeah. Yep.
because it's the only
Yep.
way, right?
Yep.
Because they
Yep.
have thousands of emails, right? Um, and you either book them a year out or you book them 2 weeks before, right? So you learn some tools and tricks. Like, you don't host webinars because they
Hmm.
don't show, they will replay them, but like they don't show up for them, right? And it's not a criticism, it's just like and you learn that if you're going to host an in-person event, that it should be typically on a Monday, and it should be early in the morning, and right, like all the things. So and I think that goes to the core of like, know your audience,
Yeah.
right? And know what you want to get out of them and make it clear. Because the other thing is, if you ask a chef what they think, they'll give you a million ideas. If you ask them, can you do X? They'll say yes or no.
Yeah.
And And so that is, it's a clarity of audience, a clarity of ask, and then I think the other thing that a lot of folks don't do, and so chefs might ghost them, is that no one ever says thank you, right? Like,
Yeah.
you ask, a lot of fundraising organizations will ask chefs to cook and do all those things, and the chef will never hear from them until the next year when the fundraiser is, and it's like, yeah, I didn't even get a thank you. So I always
Yeah.
encourage like everyone to just say thank
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
you.
That's awesome. What else are you up to these days? Because I know like there's a lot happening and you're pushing a lot of this forward.
Yeah, I mean, I'm very excited about the possibility of a second book. I'm working on the concepts around that with my editor. I'm an adjunct professor these days at the Culinary Institute of America. I'm teaching a class this summer on perspectives of leadership, which is a really amazing opportunity to bring different food systems leaders into the CIA and into the next generation of folks that are going to go into companies and kitchens and institutional food service. So that's pretty exciting. And then I have a consulting business, and I continue to work with a lot of food system funders, foundations, nonprofit organizations. I think the project that I'm probably most excited about is, or a project I'm very excited about, is a coalition with the Natural Resources Defense Coalition that's focused on chefs for healthy soil. So as we move into this discussion of climate change and the impact of climate change on restaurants and farms, to have a group of chefs who are dedicated to coming to Capitol Hill to talk about soil quality it's kind of fun.
Yeah, that's awesome. That's awesome. Well, congrats on the nomination and getting this out there and all the great work. I'll put a link to where people can find the book. But thanks for joining. It was fun, and we've been talking about a lot of stuff. So we're gonna figure out a way to collaborate somehow.
Yeah, I just want the special limited edition political podcast on food, right, for the election, because
Yeah,
if there's anything like this is, I know people say it all the time, but like this truly might be the most defining election of multiple generations, and certainly when it comes to food. So go register to vote and get out to vote.
yeah. That is a great reminder. Thank you.
You're welcome.
I appreciate that.
It's all I do these days. Go vote.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. All right. Thank you for that reminder, and thanks everybody for listening and watching. And we'll be back next week. Thanks, Catherine.
Thanks, RJ.